All right, welcome to our first lecture on complex heredity. It's a very short chapter. We're not going to go into much detail with this. And don't let the word complex kind of trip you up. Really what this means is that, well, in comparison to Mendelian heredity, where a trait is either expressed or it's not expressed, such as you have attached earlobes or you don't have attached earlobes, or you can taste PTC or you can't taste PTC, complex heredity means that the gene or the trait there's a wide variety of different ways to express that trait. That's what complex heredity means. So let's get started with complex heredity. All right, there's 6 main types of complex heredity: incomplete dominance, codominance, sex-linked traits, polygenic inheritance, multifactorial inheritance, and pleiotropy. I put stars next to these first 3 because those are going to be the ones that we focus on, and I'm going to mention these, but we're really not going to go into much detail about them. Also, during the Mendelian chapter, we talked about some traits like eye color or hair color that are as being Mendelian and following Mendelian rules, but they really don't. So we just I use those traits because they're easily accessible. That everyone knows what eye color is, but in reality, a lot of the traits that we talked about are allow for complex patterns to be used during their inheritance. So our first trait is incomplete dominance. I like this sentence because it uses all the vocabulary from the previous chapter, and it's a type of inheritance where the phenotype, the physical description of a genotype that is heterozygous, is a blend of both parental genotypes. So, for example, if you have a homozygous genotype for the parents where it's red, big R, and then you have a homozygous where it's white, big W, big W, the offspring will be a blend of those two phenotypes. So red and white will make pink. So the best way to remember incomplete dominance is that it's a blend. Interestingly, if you take these offspring and you cross-pollinate those, you'll get an interesting pattern in the next generation. So here's your parent generation. They breed together to make pink. Pink would make, if you breed pink together, you'll get 1 red, 2 pink, and then 1 white again. So you get this interesting, the red and the white will come back out in the next generation. Nose shape is an example of incomplete dominance. All right, our next one is codominance. This is where both alleles are visible in the phenotype of a heterozygous offspring. In other words, both alleles will be present. They'll both be expressed. It's not going to be a blend. They're actually both going to be there. So a snapdragon like this one is an offspring of a red and white flower, or red flower and a white flower, and it makes a red and white flower instead of an entirely pink flower. Horses. A lot of horses have skin color that show codominance. So you have little patches here of skin where the pigmentation is brown, and other patches of fur where the pigmentation is white. The same thing with cows, cheetahs. This lobster is kind of cool. This is actually not codominance, but it kind of looks like it might be. It's a little more complicated. It's something called chimerism, but it's kind of cool. It's similar to what we're thinking about, but it's not exactly codominance. Same thing with this type of cat, a tortoiseshell cat. It's slightly more complicated than codominance, but it's a cool picture, and it kind of illustrates what codominance might look like if cats could change their hair like this based off of codominant inheritance patterns. Blood type is codominance, though, and we're going to learn a lot more about blood type in our next kind of class. Okay, sex-linked traits. These are traits, you had experience with these before, so there's nothing too new here. These are traits that are located on a sex chromosome, either an X or a Y. So remember that an X and an X, that's going to make a male, and X and a Y is going to make a male, and an X and an X is going to make a female. When you're using Punnett squares or when you're tracking the alleles with sex-linked traits, you're going to want to include the chromosome as well, and I'll show you an example of what I mean in just a second. One important thing to note about sex-linked traits is that they can follow, by itself, this is not a type or a method of inheritance, it's just a location of where inheritance occurs. So for example, a sex-linked trait could follow Mendelian rules, it could follow codominant rules, or it may follow incomplete dominant rules. But as long as the inheritance, or as long as the allele occurs on an X or Y chromosome, we call it a sex-linked trait. So for example, what that would look like, let's see. One of the problems or one of the interesting results of these X chromosomes is that because the Y chromosome is significantly shorter, it misses a section and therefore it's missing some alleles. So in this cartoon picture, it shows that it's missing the A, B, and C allele on the Y chromosome. The implications are that if you're a female and you have a recessive disorder in one of these locations right here, A, B, or C, what that means is that if you have one of those bad X chromosomes, or rather, if you have a recessive disorder in one of those locations on one of your X chromosomes, then we'll call that X chromosome tainted. So this blue color represents a recessive disorder on an X chromosome. Now, the mother also has another X chromosome. She has 2 copies, but on this one, it's not a recessive disorder. It's a regular allele for whatever genotype or whatever phenotype that is. So if she were to pass this X down to her male offspring and he inherited the Y from his father, he would be a normal male, no problems. Likewise, if a daughter of hers inherited this X chromosome with the regular alleles and this X chromosome from her dad with regular alleles, she would be normal as well. But the male is where you have a problem. So what would happen is if he inherited this X chromosome from the mom with the bad alleles on them, then he's only going to get that X chromosome. He's not going to get a backup copy because he gets the Y. And remember, the Y chromosome is shorter, so it's missing a bit of possible alleles that might prevent him from having some whatever diseases on this X chromosome. Likewise, with a female, she's going to get the bad X chromosome from her mom, but she's going to get a good X chromosome from her dad, which will override the bad one. So she'll just be a carrier. She'll have the bad genes, but she'll be okay because she has regular genes as well. In a Punnett square, what that looks like is when you combine them, you put the allele that's in question as a superscript to the chromosome. And if you'll notice, the Y chromosome doesn't have the actual allele. So it's left blank. Same thing over here. Okay, polygenic inheritance. This is when many genes influence one trait. So a good example of a polygenic trait would be skin color, which is influenced by about 12 or so genes. So that means 24 alleles can come together and be dominant or recessive, or a mixture of both. And you'll have very dark skin if most of those alleles are dominant, which means that you'll produce a lot of melanin. Or you'll have very light skin where all the alleles are recessive. Most likely you'll have a mixture of both and fall somewhere in this range right here. Eye color is also polygenic. We've talked about it as being Mendelian in the past, but it's actually a little bit more complicated, and multiple genes and multiple alleles come together to create eye color. Okay, multifactorial inheritance refers to traits that are also influenced by the environment. This is very similar to epigenetics in a sense. So there are some traits in your body, some phenotypes that have no response to the environment. For example, we all have one head, right? We have one spine. We have one gene that codes for one spine, or one humerus, or one femur. But some traits can be influenced by the environment, such as your height or your weight. So if you're malnutritious or if you're malnourished, you might be shorter. If you eat too much junk, then you might have weight problems. Cancer can be something that can be influenced by the environment, but you also might be genetically predisposed to get cancer. Diabetes, again, you might have diabetes that runs in your family, but if you eat very carefully, you might be able to avoid diabetes. So those are examples of multifactorial inheritance patterns. And lastly, we have something called pleiotropy. Pleiotropy is where one gene influences many traits. And the mechanism for this is that a gene will produce something that's used by many different types of cells. So your skin cells may use this type of protein that's produced by this allele, as well as your eye cells. And so they're going to have a similar kind of inheritance pattern based off of one gene that you inherit. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, please come in and let me know.